Hello everybody and welcome to our first adventure of 2020. I am out today just north of Vicksburg, Arizona, about 90 miles west of Phoenix, and I have a pretty fun overnight trip planned today. The goal is to head a few miles north of here to the ruins of the Desert Queen Mine and the former boomtown of Winchester. After checking out the mine, I'll head in a southeasterly direction, checking out another prospect and set of abandoned buildings. From there, we'll cruise on some desert trails, cross over the highway, and head through some incredible scenery on the Hope to Harquahala road. After finding a great place to camp for the night, I'll continue on the trail in the morning to Harquahala road, back to I-10, and then end the trip at the abandoned Salome Emergency Airfield. It should be a really fun time, and I am very excited to be back out in the desert doing a little exploring. I am starting my trip here, just about a mile north of Vicksburg and Highway 72. I'll be heading north on this trail for 3 miles into the surrounding Granite Wash Mountains. From this vantage point, you can already begin to see the reason why I'm out here. This particular area is home to numerous different mines, all of which operated with varied success. The trail begins very easy and actually stays mostly easy all the way up to the mine. During this time of year, this area can be quite busy with RVers and snowbirds that camp out in the open areas. So don't expect to find much solitude out here. Things on the trail remained easy. The trail had a few spots of minor washouts, but there was nothing crazy by any means. After a couple of miles of desert trails, I veered off to the right at a trail junction and climbed towards the first set of ruins left at the Desert Queen Mine. A few cement foundations and an old mining cabin sit here just to the west of all of the main workings. The cabin here has definitely seen better days, but this was actually the residence of Josiah Winchester. Winchester was the original owner of the mine here and was the namesake for the town that eventually popped up. There was some interesting rock and woodwork used during construction. The cabin had some sort of stovepipe, as evidenced by the hole in the roof, and some kind of counter or workstation remains on one of the walls. It is unclear what the other cement foundations located around the cabin were used for, but quite a few do remain. The hill in the background is actually where most of the mining took place and is littered with different prospects and adits. From the cabin, I continued to the east. The trail briefly climbs and then enters a narrow section of mining trail. This roughly half-mile trail leads to the more interesting ruins of the main adit and the ore bin that are left at the Desert Queen. With rock walls on one side and a pretty nice drop-off on the other, there certainly wasn't much room for air here. There certainly isn't enough room to pass another vehicle, which of course happened as I approached the mine. I came across a group of side-by-sides which were luckily really close to the mine turnaround, and they were able to back up a short distance and allow me to get by. But with the different holes and tight section of trail, this definitely is a place you want to use some caution. After the trail traffic jam, I arrived at the mouth of the Desert Queen mine, located on a small set of rocky hills. I hopped out to explore. There is definitely a lot to look at here. The Desert Queen mine was first prospected in around 1890. Josiah Winchester originally owned the workings. Winchester met up with Dick Wick Hall, a businessman, promoter, and co-founder of the nearby town of Siloam. Hall took ore samples from the mine back to Phoenix in 1909. He paraded the ore through the streets and claimed that they had assayed between $117,000 and $338,000 of gold per ton. This, of course, drew a little bit of attention. Those numbers were insanely high and were on par with some of the biggest bonanzas in the West. People quickly flocked west, following Hall back to the Desert Queen. Josiah Winchester sold $2,500 worth of plots on the first day alone, and within the first month, 2,000 people called Winchester home. Stores, a saloon, 2 restaurants, and numerous other amenities soon sprung up in the surrounding town. It became the largest settlement on the newly constructed Arizona and California Railway. However, the gold quickly played out. It seemed that the big strike everyone was promised was little more than a small vein of gold. After producing only $30,000, the town collapsed just 2 months later. People left Winchester, although the mine continued to operate off and on until 1942, producing a little more gold, silver, copper, and other minerals. Probably the most impressive ruin left today is the large ore bin that hangs off the edge of the waste rock pile near the mouth of the mine. This structure somehow has held the test of time. Numerous other shafts and prospects remain near the main adit. The main adit itself goes back a decent way, and surprisingly has no gates or fences. Outside of the mine, evidence of rail ties remain planted in the ground. Curiously, a pretty good-sized wooden basin remains just to the left of where the tracks would have been, buried in the ground. It is covered only by a pile of wooden timbers, and I actually almost missed this detail when walking around. Just above the main entrance is a large 500-gallon water basin. Additional prospects remain on the hill above, and on the north side, additional workings can be found. On the desert floor below the main level of the mine is further evidence of mining structures. It is unclear what these would have been used for, but it was probably all part of the milling and processing part of the operation. And that's pretty much all there is to the Desert Queen. It's definitely a neat place to check out. Interestingly enough, back in 2009, the mining property was listed for sale just under $2 million. It's unclear whether or not the mine ever sold and who the actual owners are today. After an hour at the mine, I was soon heading back for Vicksburg, retracing my route along the sometimes narrow but mostly easy trail. 3 short miles later, I was back on pavement and crossing over the railroad tracks to get back to Highway 72. My next turnoff was only half a mile down the road. After passing through a gate, I was then on a wide trail heading southeast. This trail would take me all the way back to Harquahala and I-10, but of course, this was the scenic route. There would be no more pavement for the day, minus a short highway crossing a little ways down the trail. A few miles down the road, I turned off the main trail to check out something I had seen on Google Earth. A short distance off the main road were the ruins of some kind of an old building. The ruins themselves were surprisingly impressive. With intricate cement and rock work, this was likely some kind of home at one point in the past. The building featured a nice entryway, fireplace and mantel, and even some hidden details within the walls. A few hundred yards to the south were some prospects. This is the Copa De Oro Prospect, a small operation that produced some lead, silver, and copper. Unfortunately, there is no other info on this place or what kind of success it had. It seems like it was a pretty small operation, so probably nothing major. It was definitely a neat side trip though. I returned back to the main trail and continued to the east. Things remained easy but scenic. The trail passed through a couple of hills as the railway split off and climbed to the left. Another mile or two later, I was soon back to the highway. I quickly crossed over and passed through another gate. I was now headed south on the Hope to Harquahala Road. This 10-mile trail connects Highway 72 and I-10. Things started off relatively flat and straight. The road remained nice and easy, and while there was a little bit of traffic, there was certainly less people out here. After about 5 miles, the trail curved and entered a scenic, narrow area between two mountains. The terrain was really something. The trail continued to meander southeast, and I eventually arrived at a small set of rocky hills. This is the area I planned on camping at, and luckily, there was no one here. I parked the Jeep and quickly got out to scout the area. Alright, so we have made it most of the way down the Hope to Harquahala Road. Not a very long trail, I think it's about 10 miles total, but some nice views, very easy, and I made it to my intended campsite for the night that I pre-planned ahead of time, and it's pretty, to say the least. It is definitely not a bad camp spot. Just these nice little rocky outcrops, providing a little bit of wind protection and just making for a really great view. So got to camp. It's about 3 o'clock right now. Probably just gonna leisurely set up camp, hang out for a little bit, relax, maybe have a beer, and then I'll be getting on to dinner later. But for now, I'm just gonna get camp set up and hang out for a little bit. It's been a good day so far. We've been hitting all the stuff we want to check out, and here we are, home sweet home for the night. Within 5 minutes, I had the tent popped open and ready. I got the camp kitchen all set up, and that was about it. I sat down to enjoy a beer and check out the amazing view. This interesting set of rocky hills really made for a unique desert campsite. After a little while, I decided to climb up one of the hills and check out the view from the top. After a brief hike, I was treated to a 360-degree panorama of the surrounding area. To the north, the Granite Wash Mountains were visible far off in the distance. In the foreground were some more rolling desert hills and the little Harquahala Mountains. To the south, I-10 stretched across the horizon, and barely visible far off in the distance was the large American flag at Vicksburg Junction. The weather was a bit windy, but absolutely perfect. After a little while, I headed back downhill to camp. As the light began to fade around 5:30, I fired up the stove and started on dinner. Tonight, I'd be doing chicken quesadillas. It's a simple but delicious meal, and paired up with some fresh green salsa and another beer, it really hit the spot. By 6:30, the sun was finally down. I dug out a small pit and got a fire going. After relaxing for a while and enjoying the clear night sky, which had some pretty incredible views, I eventually crawled up into the tent for the night. After a restful night of sleep, I was up just before 8 the following morning. I stayed in the tent for a little while and enjoyed the view. Last night I slept really great. The temperature was a tad chilly in the mid-40s, but overall was very mild and calm. After mustering up the motivation to get going, I was soon out of the tent and prepping breakfast. I boiled some water to be used for some quick oatmeal and camp coffee. Within minutes, that was all ready. Alright, so we are up and around, have breakfast done, just enjoying the last bit of my coffee right now, but last night was great. Very mild temperatures, not bad at all. I think it got probably into the low 40s, maybe mid 40s, but enough where I was able to sleep comfy, and then of course with these shorter days that meant a longer night. So able to get all rested up, enjoy a good breakfast, lounge here around camp for a little while, but it's getting to be a little bit later now, so I'm gonna be packing up camp real quick, and then we'll be back on the trail. Things were soon in place in the back of the Jeep, and then I got the tent all packed up. After a little bit later than usual departure from camp, I was then back on the Hope to Harquahala road. I only had a couple miles left. The road was wide and fast moving for the most part. I soon reached Harquahala Road. Staying left here would take you past the ruins at Harquahala Mine and on to Siloam. Since I had just visited this area less than a year ago with my cousin, I stayed to the right to head south. What is normally an extremely fast desert road where you're consistently able to hold 45 to 50 miles per hour was a little bit different today. Multiple wash crossings on the road have changed things. With all of the rain this past year, the sections of trail near washes have become a bit rutted out. It's nothing that requires an extremely capable vehicle by any means, but it's just a reminder that the trails can and will change after some rain, at least until they are graded again. I was soon crossing over I-10, but there was one more thing I wanted to check out before heading back home. After crossing over the CAP, I turned left off Hovatter Road. The trail is very fast moving as it heads east along I-10 and then splits off to the south. Within just a couple of miles, I had arrived at a large clearing, which used to be the home of the Siloam Emergency Airfield. I cruised down one of the old runways. Today, there really isn't much left. The 2 gravel runways remain in pretty rough shape. A compass marker or some kind of outline sits in the middle of the field. The airfield was built sometime between 1931 and 1934. Originally called American Airways Field, it was designed to be an alternate landing site for airmail and airline flights between Phoenix and Los Angeles. The field was only ever to be used for training or emergency landings. There were no buildings on site. Only a 4,100-foot east and west runway and a 3,900-foot north-south runway. Today, not much remains. A small fenced-off area remains on the west part of the field, but it's unclear the significance of what's inside or what used to be here. Siloam Emergency Field remains to be a popular spot for RVers and certain astronomy groups who use the wide area and dark skies to play around with their telescopes. After a quick tour, I turned around and returned on the smooth road back to I-10. And with that, another adventure comes to an end. This one was a lot of fun. While this was a lower mileage trip than normal, I still got the chance to check out some cool stops and get back in the desert for some camping. It was nice returning to the Desert Queen for a little further exploration as well. The scenery, trails, and campsite were all fantastic on this trip. I look forward to getting a few more desert trips in before the summer heat, but until the next one, thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next one.